I'm welcoming Joanna Summerscales and Bill Brooks, and our surprise guest, John Dillon, later on, who will join us. Bill Brooks is an ex-soldier. He became a musician later on from the British Army back in the 60s. He had a memory flash recall and download at age 44 during an ET encounter, and discovered he'd had a lifetime of alien abductions and mind control experiments. And tonight we'll speak about, with the co-author Joanna and Bill, about the book 44, his amazing experiences in the world of military and ET abductions, secret societies as well, and Freemason persecution, mind control experiments, MK Ultra type, black programs, and Men in Black encounters. He's also had encounters with Nordics, Greys, Reptilians, Shadow Beings, and Men in Blacks. So good night, Joanna. If you want to introduce yourself and the Ammach that you used to run, and how Bill came about to speak up and come out of the closet through the Ammach, and how now you're running a new newsroom that is called ETN, ET Newsroom.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thanks for having us all on, along with our surprise guest, who's actually John Sutton, not John Dillon. But anyway, the Ammach Project ran for 5 years, from 2011 till end of December 2015. And essentially, most people know my work in the field, but I was interviewing experiencers and researchers in the end, because I also had my own radio show, the Ammach Files, which ran for a little over a year as well. And essentially, it's research. When Bill called me, because one of the things that Ammach has done is to provide a helpline, a unique helpline. This is in the UK. But interestingly, I've had calls from all over the world, and certainly emails as well. So I've had some absolutely fascinating information come through about this whole field and subject, but especially the experiences. I'm particularly interested in the human condition, from the spiritual end of things, to where this is taking us in our galactic trip as humanity. So back to Bill. Bill contacted me back in about 2012 after he'd seen me on TV doing some interviews, and he'd had a series of heart attacks and strokes, and really thought that he was the end of the road of his life, and just thought he'd have one more shot at getting hold of someone to try and share his story, to try and get some feedback, some input, some help, some support. He was in really bad shape. His health was in a shocking state, and really just every which way, because as the title of the book says, not only has he had a lifelong encounters with alien abduction for over 44 years now, but also he's had encounters with Men in Black, a serial killer as well, and certainly there's been mass persecution by the Freemasons, and this is quite a mix. And I myself had never heard of such a mix. Now, so we could progress the book, as Ammach came to an end, and it came to a natural end in as much as things had changed in the mid part of the Ammach world in about sort of 3 years ago, but I wanted to carry on, so I've gone under a new banner, starting again, and it's called the ET Newsroom, or ETN, and people will have to excuse me, I still have not attended to the website properly, but that will get done in due course. But it's out there on Facebook and Twitter.
I know. I have interviewed you a few times on my shows in France for the Ammach, and had also hosted a few Ammach abductees from
yes.
your group.
Yeah. So the culmination of the work with Bill actually was nearly 4 years. And one of the reasons it took so long, and we published out there on Amazon and Kindle, is because we did it ourselves, because we looked at publishers, and that just wasn't going to work. That was going to take forever. And also Bill's health has taken some real knocks. 2 years ago, he died. In fact, it's about almost 2 years to the day, I think maybe less, 2 days. He died for a couple of minutes and was resuscitated. And we really thought, my goodness, are we going to get this book finished? So we worked really hard, but also because of some of the memories that actually came back during the writing. Now, there weren't any major memories, but there were some detailed memories which really shocked Bill. And some of the research that I did really set him back psychologically. And we would have to take breaks sometimes of several weeks, even 2 or 3 months, so he could recover and then get some perspective on what was coming through. And so here we have this book, and I think it's, you know, really a fantastic accolade to Bill that he has come forward. And I will say that in the title of the book, it says based on an ex-soldier's true story. And the reason that we've put that is because Bill also will tell you the story, but he had a cousin who was actually murdered by the Freemasons, and he can tell you that, but he was very concerned for not only his own welfare, but for that of his son. And so we put base, so we've got a bit of wiggle room if anybody challenges him on that. But I can tell you from what I know, this is all factual as far as Bill recalls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have some direct interaction with Freemasons here in France quite a bit. I know I'm surrounded by Freemasons all over in ufology, which is a field, research field that is very infiltrated by Freemasons. But Freemasons are also abductees and some contactees and researchers, and they're not all. They don't all belong to the Black Lodges that are tied into the power that be, you know, the powers that be and the government. But lots of them are, and I know they can be a threat sometimes when they want something to disappear or shut down. So
yes. I think what's interesting about Bill's story as well, and some people may have heard it, I don't know, but just to give you a very quick overview, Bill was born in 1950 in the West Midlands of the UK, which is also known as the Black Country, near a place called Stourbridge. And that's also very close to the birthplace of Robert Plant, whom he also met a few times and seems to feature in the story from time to time during meetings. Which is really interesting, because one of Bill's most, I suppose, profound contacts events happened kind of almost in the backyard of Robert Plant's place, because it was in the field where he had the house was looking over. So, and I've been to all of these major sites as well. So, you know, it really gives you a sense of the structure and the area, the geography, and you really get a hands-on feel for it. So it was very interesting. So Bill grew up essentially eldest of 3 siblings. He had a brother who was very severely disabled physically, but not mentally. So that in effect meant that his mum was preoccupied with keeping that son alive, in and out of hospital a lot. So Bill, who had no education bar maybe 6 months when he was about 5 or 6, and again another 6 months when he was about 13, had no education, and his education was nature, the fields, the canals, the lovely woods. Apart from the association with his family, Bill's job was to, his father working away, Bill's main job was in fact to look after the house, make food, and pick his little sister up from school and take her there. And in between times, he would go off to these locations, which in those days, back in the 1950s, early 1960s, were completely isolated, very, very, hardly anybody went there. When I went with Bill, it's now also, it's not a crop field, it's grassed over, people walk their dogs there now. But the thing that happened in that field actually seemed to stop all crop production from there on in, Bill noted. Oh. So that's really an interesting point. So Bill grew up very raw, you know, grew up with this native intelligence, not believing in UFOs or ETs. And in fact, thinking you or I, Mark, we're completely, losing our marbles if we did say we believed in all of this.
Yeah, in the ufology field, England is the major country for crop circles. So it's not astonishing. It's probably connected to those sacred sites and ley lines that have crossing over.
Well, I don't know whether you want to bring Bill on just to tell you about that particular event, because it's the only occasion that I'm aware of that anybody was actually in a crop circle as it was being made. And that encounter that he had was actually with the Nordics for the second time. The first time when he was 5, but this time was a profound time, and it was a contact and not an abduction, probably one of only 2 contacts, and both with Nordics. So that is so amazing.
Sure, we can bring him on in a few minutes. I just wanted to say that actually Bill had a hypnotherapy session with Barbara Lamb, right? She's also...
He was going to, actually. Well, he thinks it's Barbara. Well, we both think it must be Barbara because there was no one fitting that description who was around at the time. I think there was an attempt, and then there was a neighbor with a lawnmower going, so that kind of precluded any peace and quiet. And then I think Barbara, didn't want to continue, or it wasn't appropriate to continue at the time. So Bill has, in fact, never been through any hypnosis or regression at all. Now, I'm a regression therapist, and Bill has had so much memory return after the age of 44, as you said at the beginning. He had this incredible download, a little bit like a near-death experience, in fact, where he saw his entire life go before him, and incredibly all the ET stuff, which he actually didn't believe in, that his cousin and his brother had been trying to tell him about in years past.
That happened in 1994, right? It happened in 1994.
1994, right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Going back to Barbara, I mentioned her because I met her in Paris, and she told me about her crop circle, tours in England, and that she was doing, leading, and also her experience on board a ship, a craft that was actually drawing crop circles when she was on board.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, so that was pretty
fascinating.
amazing.
That's interesting. I'd love to talk to her. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was just thinking, Mark, there are so many stories that we want to kind of mention, so many events of Bill's, but the Nordic one is very interesting because they also mention the reptilians in their first encounter with Bill, where they have any conversation, and they also talk about God, or God is mentioned. And I really would love Bill to talk about that, because those are two huge areas of interest for people.
You think it would be better for Bill to tell us about his big recollection event, at 44,
yeah,
and then we can go back to all the flashbacks.
Sure, whatever you like.
Bill,
so
can you tell us?
Would you like me to run through that? I'm very happy to do that if you like.
Sure, go ahead, and then we'll have Bill on.
Okay, okay, Bill, I know you can hear me, so if I'm missing out any bits, I'm just going to do a really short version of it because there's so much to get through, and I want to spend time with the special guest who could come on with us, which is fantastic. Basically, so Bill's, it's 1960, and he's in this West Midlands area, and he's dropped his sister off. He's now, ridden his bike to his favorite place, and there's a crop, and he's ignored what his dad's warnings were, which were, you better not lie down in the crop, because if it's up there, you could get run over by a combine harvester. So he's always done his own thing, which is fantastic, and I think that's what's kept him alive, frankly. So he makes a bed in the tall crop, and basically he's watching the clouds, seeing the shapes, doing that fun thing, and then he sees these. Well, one comes in after the other. These two massive spheres. He reckons about 8 foot in diameter, and they're spinning around one another, and then spinning around as well. And suddenly they zip off. So he kind of gets up to see where they've gone, and only to find himself standing in what we didn't know at the time, or wouldn't have known at the time, was a crop circle. And in the distance, there is something that looks like a ship. Well, it is a ship, but it also resembles it was called the Bluebird, and it was a craft that was used for land speed records, water speed records, with a guy called Donald Campbell way back in the day. And it reminded him a little bit of that. So he'd seen this craft. He actually hadn't seen it land, but there it was. And then there was this party of 4 beings or people coming towards him, looking human, probably a family by the looks of it, 2 adults, 2 smaller ones if they were children. And so when they meet him, there may have been other conversation going on, but this is what he essentially remembers. They ask him, first of all, they looked a little bit anxious, a little bit uncomfortable, and they were looking around, and they asked Bill if he'd seen any reptiles or reptilians. He's not sure of the word they used, but he didn't even know what that meant or what that was. So he just said no, because he knew the area like the back of his hand, and he hadn't seen anything unusual. So it was perfectly logical that There were none. So with that, they kind of relaxed, and there was a conversation that ensued. But first of all, he asked them where had they come from, and they indicated the sky. And he said, oh, this lovely, you know, kind of 10-year-old lad, all excited, are you from God? And they said, no, that's a concept on your planet, and we can't comment. But they had also said that they had broken free. I think I may be paraphrasing, but it's more or less correct, Bill. Tell me if I'm wrong. They had broken free from their masters who would have made them slaves. And because they'd just been talking about the reptilians, we've kind of surmised that maybe they were talking about the reptilians. We don't know. It's speculation. But then they went on, amongst other things, to talk about whether that the Earth was in trouble and would he help if he could, which he said he would. And when he asked what they would like him to do, they said, you'll know at the time. So in between...
Which brings me back to this this big event in Viking Norse mythology, the Ragnarok, which seems to go back to the old ancient rivalry and duality between the Nordics and reptilians, and between Vikings and the serpent. You know, and it's called the Ragnarok. It's a prophecy of Ragnarok that tells that Thor's failure to kill the serpent bodes disaster. Basically, it's a series of apocalyptic events that will define the end of the world, according to them. You know,
it's interesting, isn't it? And also, my uncle found out that our name, Summerscales, it has Viking roots.
Right. And it seems like in ufology history, as far as the contactees are telling it, the Nordics and the reptoids or reptiloids or reptilians have an ancient history of fighting each other together, and it reflects into the Norse and Viking mythology, you know, with the Ragnarok event, and those Nordics asking Bill if he had seen any reptilians. So that's what's funny. I took pictures at the Dublin Museum, actually, of this Ragnarok mythology stone there. I don't know if we can show it, but it's pretty interesting. The sentence.
Is that the one that shows the serpent on it as well?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is really interesting, because you think that all of this must have sprung from something, you know, deep within, you know, our psyche, our experiences. And the fact that so many people are having experiences one way or another, whether it's with these kind of guys or others, definitely.
Right.
So Bill was actually asked to go, if he'd like to go for a ride, which he did. Mm-hmm. And he went and bought the craft just like it was really normal. And when I said to him, well, didn't you think that was a bit strange? He said, well, no, I'd seen Flash Gordon and I thought that was real. That's lovely.
He figured out it wasn't a speedboat, right?
Yeah. It was just that, you know, in those days, also 1959, 1960, there wasn't a lot around. You know, this is post-war UK. I mean, you know, the UK only stopped having ration books in 1954 or 5, something like that. I can't remember what my dad said, but anyway, you know, so it was very, very poor. So they weren't used to seeing unusual things or even many cars around the area. You know, it's an interesting thing when you look at the context of the social, you know, climate. And of course, there was definitely no ET talked about, nothing like that. Although Bill's mum was very interested in all of that kind of thing, and perhaps the paranormal as well. But so Bill finds himself aboard ship, and he's left with the youngsters, let's call them at the moment, and they're playing with these spheres, these small balls, orange balls, and they're moving them with their mind. And they tell Bill that he can do the same, and he does. And so he says these days, well, I think they did it. They were responsible for, you know, me doing that, because I can't do it now. So
I don't have any of those fears today, but maybe I don't know.
But and then I don't know whether it's mum or dad, let's call them, comes to get him, and they go into this other room where there's a kind of a it's a plinth, like a dais. In fact, there is a picture We do have a picture, I think we sent, with the two beings with this raised dais. It's like a platform. And on the top of that is like an extended cake cover. It's perspex, and inside there is what looks like an old child's spinning top toy. And indeed it was spinning. And Bill said that as it spun, as it spun very fast, it went in and out of vision. I think we have the picture up now. So as you can see, there's the woman is pointing to a window, a round window where Bill could actually see the earth through. And then they went off for a ride. As this thing spun into invisibility, so the ship lifted off and the earth receded at a rate of knots. And they had a little ride out, no idea how much time that took. And then Bill just noticed a look of concern over the lady's face as she said to, maybe to him and to the other person, the male, okay, I don't think we can take him any further, something along those lines, and brought him back. And that essentially was his trip. And they dropped him off, and off he went. And before he went, he said, "Will I see you again?" And they said, "Yes, look to the clouds," which is a very enigmatic thing to say. Look to the clouds, which he did or has done ever since. And they went, but before they went, he had to run off and get his little sister. But he noticed that his bike was missing. And frantically, he's looking for his bike because in those days, they couldn't afford another bike or anything like that. So anyway, it was getting so late, he decided he was going to have to run off, just run to get his sister. And as he turned around, suddenly the space people were there again with his bike and handed him his bike. And there was no response as to, well, where did you get that from? And anyway, that was it. He beetled off to get his sister and off they went. So that's the nuts and bolts of the Nordic story. But it is astonishing because, there's this little guy, 10 years old, not at all aware that this is one of the most extraordinary events that a human being can have.
Right, exactly. So, and he recalled all this at the age 44 in 1944.
Yeah.
Right. Can he tell us about? Oh, can you tell us quickly about this recollection event, this encounter that seemed to be like an NDE download or sudden download of flashbacks of all his life? Yes.
Well, if I give you the lead up to it, and then Bill tells you the actual event, because it is extraordinary. He was actually working as a professional musician at this time, and he was on his way back from a place called Porthmadog, and he was coming over the Berwyn Mountains. And the Berwyn Mountains is also famous or infamous for having an alleged UFO crash back in 1974. But not that he knew that. He didn't know that then. But anyway, so he notices, but he doesn't know this until he gets indoors and has this NDE experience, 2 or 3 hours later. There's a UFO in the sky following almost the contours of the land, but it is also, he's got a big old Volvo car, and they've got these big long bonnets, and it's actually reflecting in the bonnet of his car. And so... And we did this trip. Bill and I went along this road because he thought he'd lost a few miles, but actually he lost 26 miles, which is quite a considerable distance before he kind of regained his consciousness again. Now, all drivers, myself included, have had that time when we have kind of lost our sort of conscious driving experience, and then we suddenly click back in. But there's nothing untoward about that. Well, he just thought that had happened. And then when he got home, he parked up. And I've been to this location, and I won't give you the exact name, but it's not too far from Oswestry. And he said there was this astonishing image. And it was about a 300-foot tall, conical shaped, with a cone shaped large at the top as normal cone shaped. Probably going down into about a 20-foot, maybe going slightly smaller. And it was absolutely covered with sort of electrical activities, as if there were sparks all around it. And it was very huge. And he actually did. He put his guitar away, came back and went and had a look at it and stood for about 20 minutes. In fact, he was in hand's reach of this thing. And he was just observing it and thinking, wow, isn't that clever? What they can do with lasers these days. This is almost outside his front door.
Did he feel any strangeness or electricity or getting his hand?
I think it was electrical. From his description, it sounds like it was an electrical activity that was occurring. I mean, he actually said it reminded him, as a singer, of the song Crystal Chandelier, because it was just like a massive chandelier as it just hung in the sky. And because I think there was a fair over in Oswestry, which is about 5 miles distance, he just thought, wow, this is some fantastic laser show. I mean, back in, 1994, perhaps they did things like that. But that's really what he thought, because he was so, up until the age of 44, Bill has been completely mind controlled and compartmentalized to any of this. I mean, as I've been working with him, I've got frustrated myself sometimes and said, how can you possibly not have known X, Y, and Z, mainly the whole story? And he said, I don't know, but I didn't. But when he had the download, which is about to happen in a minute, then he knew unequivocally that all his life, up until that age, he'd been an abductee, and his brother and his cousin were correct. And as he says, if he hadn't had another abduction after that age, he'd have honestly thought he was going through some kind of mental breakdown, because he was also having, he'd just been through marriage difficulties and the loss of his mom and brother. He'd had a very difficult time leading up to this event as well. But I think it would be great for Bill to pick up the story and tell you himself about the actual download, because it is such a mind bender.
Yes. Hi, Bill.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfect.
Right, where do you want me to come from, Joanne?
Well, I've just described the great, huge 300-foot tall thing that was in almost outside your door, and that you've just gone back in, and you're going to relax and chill out after your session and do a little bit of analysis. So why don't you pick it up from there and see?
I think you try to turn on the TV or something, right?
Sorry?
I think you tried to turn on the TV at that point, right?
Yeah, no, what happened was, after I saw this, Joanne described the crystal chandelier, I described it as, in the sky, I got bored watching that. and this, I just thought it was a laser show or something, I didn't believe in any of this. I went into the house, did my normal trick. I've got a very expensive, I did have a very, very expensive guitar at the time. Always put it in the house. The rest of the equipment I left in the garage, lock garage. And I went into the house. Sorry, I got distracted.
So you just went into the house?
Yeah, I've lost it. Sorry, I got distracted. Someone came in. I went into the house. Into the house. I sat down, as I normally did. Got a cigarette. Got a brandy. Think about the show, or think about something else, just to relax, to try and relax. It used to take me a couple of hours to relax, to go to sleep after gigs. So I used to sleep in the day, and I was awake all night. So I'm still the same now. I always have been. Sorry, I've lost it. Sorry, I've got it now. I've got it back. As I sat down, rolled myself a cigarette, poured a brandy. I got the TV on just for some background, very low. I don't think I had the sound on actually. And I was sort of sitting there relaxed, watching the wall, looking at the wall TV, and the walls seemed to shimmer. And as I looked at the TV, I looked back at the TV, and I saw three, what I know now as alien faces. I didn't then. I just looked at them, and it started to spring back memories. And I turned back to the wall, and that had changed shape. And there was shapes appearing in the wall. I know nothing about hieroglyphics, but that's the only way I can describe what I saw. I don't know anything about them now. And as I looked back at the TV, there was someone lying on a couch type structure with with 3 of these grey aliens looking over this person, doing experiments on the person. And that person looked like me.
Oh, okay.
And as this happened, of course, my mind started to go a bit crazy then. And then came the download. It just happened. It was like the first download I had was what I'd just seen on the TV, the Abingdon incident, which I'll tell you about if we get time. This is the one that came back completely. That's the only one that came back completely, is the one I saw on the TV. The rest of the abductions, they came back slowly over 20 years, over 15 years. And further than that, while we were writing the book, they were coming back because my mind was back in there. Sorry, Joanne, can you pick me back up? I've lost it.
Yeah, so you're seeing the 3 alien faces, the walls were sort of shimmering, and then you had the download. Then
the download came, and the download was started the same as what I'd seen on the TV. It started the same. Then that download came, but while that download was coming, I know this sounds ludicrous, I had other downloads coming to the back while the front download was coming in. Like the whole of the Abingdon one was coming in, but while that was happening, at the same time, at the back of my mind was coming in all the other information, like hitting the back of my head. Like, I don't know if you can understand that. Is that understandable?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It was the trigger. It was the event that triggered your total recall and brought back your partial memories of what happened to you for years.
I had 2 things coming into my brain at the same time, and I saw it all. Our brains are bigger than we think. I saw everything that was going on, and I relived the Abingdon nightmare, I might call it, but it wasn't really a nightmare. I haven't been harmed by them. That's why I will say that. Not physically, probably mentally. At the same time, I was getting one download coming to the front, which I was actually living at the time. I was reliving other downloads coming in as well, reliving them at the same time as I was living the Abingdon one. Our brains are amazingly big, I think. We can't use them. They got me to use my brain. Anytime that anything's happened in all of my abductions, they've done it for me. I've got no powers. I'm a human being. I've got nothing. They spring into power, the powers that we will have at some time, I think, if we last long enough. If the human race is good, which I'm quite doubtful of the way I've seen it. But yeah, and then as that was happening, all this download came in. The next morning, when my partner at the time got up with my new son, who was about 5 to 6 months old at the time, I was walking round and round the room saying, I've been abducted. And she said, when last night? I said, no, all my life. And of course she thought I'd gone crackers, you know, which you know, if somebody said that to me first thing in the morning, I'd think they were crackers as well, you know. But then I went into a really bad state for a few years. I started drinking a lot. I'm talking 2 to 3 bottles of brandy a day.
Whoa.
Just to try and get to sleep. Just to try and stop them. Just to try and stop my head from working. My head would not stop. For 3 years, it would not stop. It was like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep properly. I was having to work as well. I was having to go on stage as well at the same time. I was having to cut all this out of my mind when I went on stage. I used to forget my words most of the time, and I used to make them up as I went along. I got quite good at it. You know, my brain had been somewhere else while I was actually on stage. I'd come back on stage thinking I've got an audience in front of me, and I'm thinking about downloads and aliens while I'm standing on stage trying to sing. Unbelievable. I don't know how I did that.
And all those memories when you were stationed as a soldier in Germany and in the UK came back at that time?
They were ones that trickled through. The main one was Abingdon. That came back fully in front of my face as such, I was reliving it, watching it. But the others, the one you just spoke about, that came back with the other ones that went, as I was saying, to the back of the mind, as opposed to the front memory. We must have a back memory somewhere. We must have a storage place, like a computer. We must have a part that works at the time, and the part which stores all the information we're going to need at some time. That's how it seems to me. I use computer now as how our brains work, because, you know, you've got a front memory and you've got the one that keeps all the information at the back, and you have to search that. And that's like defragging, looking, searching your computer at the back of your mind, your phantom computer or whatever.
It was like your backup drive that was partially disconnected or something for years, right?
Yeah. I feel, and this might sound quite crazy, but it may not be exact, but I feel as though I've been lived inside by someone using my body and mind to maybe study the planet, maybe. And then at that point they were leaving, so they had to give me back a memory so I could carry on with life, because I'd have been a cabbage. That's how I see it. Whether it's true or not, these are my thoughts.
Right. And also all this time in the military, you were experimented on as far as mind control goes, right? For
a small amount of time, as far as I know, it could have carried on. I'm not sure about that. I've had a lot of odd things happen to me, but yeah, I think I was, you know, that brainwashing was. I don't even know how long I was there, because I remember going on the brainwashing. John will tell you about that. Actually, he was offered it as well. That's one of the reasons he's come with me on this. You know, we're old mates from a long time ago, and we hadn't spoke for 40 odd years. Actually, he's nearly 50. He told me that last night. But what happened was they came around and asked us if they offered us 2 weeks leave if we did the flu jab experiments. And so I said yes, and John said no. I didn't even know John had been offered this until I got in touch with him again a few months ago. You know, we hadn't spoken for nearly 50 years. And I didn't even know he'd been offered these as well, because I didn't know how to prove my story. I've got no proof of it. All the people are dead or won't talk. You find that. They're all dead or won't talk. But John's talking because he's into this type of thing as well, as you know. He's a psychic medium, which I knew at the time. When I met him, I knew there was I didn't know he was a psychic medium, but I knew he was different. You know, I just knew. Sorry, I've lost the gist now.
Well, I just wanted to say, Bill, also that this was in 1968, and this was not too long after you, in fact, joined your regiment over in Sennelager, Germany, and the mind control experimentation, we think, took place elsewhere. So perhaps just pick it up from what happened there, because no sooner were you going to say, okay, you'll do it, then you suddenly found yourself elsewhere.
I'd just like to say before I do that, that when I joined my regiment, John was away on practice camp. And that's when my abductions happened, when there was only the rear party there left at the camp. I didn't see it as anything abnormal. I'd just joined the regiment. I'd only been in the regiment a couple of days when that happened. And John was away on practice camp. And when he came back, he'll tell you what happened in the room when he came back. He'll tell you about that, because and also other things happened after I'd left. When I went on MK Ultra, which John refused to go on, when I left that day, mayhem was occurring in the block. John will tell you all about this when we can get John on. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Jane, can you pick me back up? I've lost it again.
Yeah. So you're over to okay. So you've signed up and you are suddenly somewhere else, and we think that somewhere else, we're pretty sure, 99% sure, that it's actually Porton Down. But yeah, you had no memory of going there at all, just that you came to there, came to consciousness there, and clearly you'd been given some hallucinogenic drugs.
That's right.
What's strange is that he wasn't fit, really, when he joined. I mean, physically, he wasn't really fit to join the army back then, right?
I was physically fit.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Oh, yes, physically. Not mentally fit, though. Not really. I hadn't been to school, you see. I had a hell of trouble when I first joined. And funny enough, this is true. John won't know about this, but I was put onto a signals course, my first one, as a signaller. I couldn't read and write properly. I could just about do a little bit. And in the 3 weeks that I did the course, at the same time I was doing the course, I learned to read and write better. And I came top of the class. I came top of the course in the exam. I thought that was incredible. I didn't tell anybody I couldn't read and write before I went on it.
And you picked it up real fast.
I must pick it up very fast. Right. I am quite a fast learner, I suppose. I was. My mind's a bit slow now, though.
The interesting thing also is that when Bill went to join up, he didn't pass the recruitment test. Right. Because he had no education. And, I wonder if Bill was sort of picked out from way back when, because they said to him, they did the test for him and said, don't worry, you'll soon pick it up. And I'm just highly suspicious that they had already got him tabbed as somebody of interest.
Right. Exactly.
Could I just interrupt a minute? I've lost it. It's okay. I've got it in my head and it's gone. The strokes, if I don't start speaking straight away, I'll lose it. It's because of the strokes. That's why I have to keep. I've had about 9 strokes in 10 years, so I lose. My brain just shuts down when I'm talking. I'm sorry about this.
That's right.
Yeah, so we're just saying that you find yourself in Porton Down. We believe it's Porton Down. We've deduced that for various reasons, and maybe you want to share that. But you were clearly under the influence of a hallucinogenic substance.
Yeah, I don't remember a great deal about it because to me it seemed like minutes. The whole experience seemed like minutes. I must have been on so many drugs. But the bits I do remember, I was sitting, or standing, I think I was sitting, in front of a spinning round circular black and white thing that made you feel as though you were going into it. Each side of me were each side of me was someone shouting at me from each side, and they were reading from books. And they were shouting at me, reading from books into both ears. As I say, I can't remember very much about this. This is a very strange period in my life. And the next thing I know, I'm back home, in a way. There was a few other things, but I'm back home in a way. This is the main part of the story. And I'm back. Brian, the guy I told you about that the Masons killed, was at my house when I got home. I don't even know how I got to my house. I can't remember anything about getting home. I just remember walking into my mum's living room. There was my cousin, dad, everybody, a few of the family sitting there. And they decided, because I'd come back on leave, to go out to my aunt's pub. I had my aunt was the mayor. I don't know whether I should have said that really, but she was the mayor, and she ran a pub where all the police went in. And for late night drinks, you know what I'm talking about. And in them days, there was licensing laws, except unless you were the police, of course. And we went to the pub, and there were 2 Americans in there. I heard them talking at the end of the bar, and my cousin was standing next to me, looking across at these. I forgot about that. He was looking across at these Americans. Anyway, we got chatting, and my uncle, who was behind the bar, who I'd only just met, I'd never met him before, in fact, said something to me, and I just grabbed him, dragged him over the bar, and punched him. I don't even know why, but it was when I looked in his eyes. But then I was pushed out the pub, my mother, everybody. My mother was the only person that could control me in them days. She got me into the car. Everyone else got in the car. Brian sat behind me, and he was smoking. And he dropped a cigarette ash down the back of my neck, and he burnt the back of my neck. So I turned around, looked in his eyes, and started punching him. They got me out of the car, and I don't know what happened after that, because I was arrested. And I was arrested. I was put inside for the night. And one of my cousins come and got me out. I wish he hadn't done, in fact. One of my cousins come and got me out. And I got home and caused mayhem there when I got back. Caused so much trouble, my sister's never spoken to me since. In all these years, 50 years, she never spoken to me. This can affect your life. It can affect you. It affects your relationship with all your family. It really this type of abduction type of stuff that I was getting really wrecks your family, friends, everyone, wives. You can't live with anyone. I don't know how my son's living with for 20 years now. I don't know any.
I think also, Bill, the thing is that came out of that mind control experiment on you that you were clearly subjected to was that you could not, from that time on, look anybody in the eyes seriously without wanting to kill them. And that was a real thing. So that's been a really big issue for you all your life. It's now muted, thank goodness for that. But, you know, because you are the person you are, this incredibly, you know, strong-willed person, it's as if they were priming you to be some kind of, you know, maybe Manchurian candidate or something, I don't know. But certainly you were never the same, and it really, really, you know, affected your life. And gosh, you know.
Years to get over it. It took years to get over that problem. You know, the problem, I couldn't look in anyone's eyes. It took me years. It took me years. I'm not like it now. It's sort of gone now. Unless there's someone I don't like, that's different. But it's gone now. You know, that major problem I had that problem for maybe 20 years. Maybe 20 years I had to look. And people, when I was having an argument with someone, they used to say that I was not telling the truth because I wouldn't look in their eyes. The only reason was I'd feel like ripping their head off. I had to look at the nose, mouth. I had to look near the eyes so that they didn't realise I wasn't looking. But I used to look at the nose of people.
But did that start with the army, or were you really aggressive before you joined the army?
I wasn't aggressive at all.
Okay, see that's part of the that's a side effects from the drugs or experiments that they did on you with mind control. Was it the same year that you took part at the mass abduction event in the army? It was
a week after.
Okay, all right.
It was within a week after, maybe even less. I may have come straight off the abduction and gone straight to there. I'm not 100% sure. I can remember John coming into the room. They came back off the exercise they were on. I hadn't met John till that day. I can remember him coming into the room because there were 4 guys in the room. John reminded me who the one was, one of the guys. But I remember John distinctly because he was different to other people I'd met before. There was something about John. I don't know if you understand that. But John saw something in that room. He'll tell you about this, you know, this all happened within a fortnight, 2 weeks. I had the abductions. I joined the army. I had the abductions within the first week I was in. I joined the regiment, sorry, not the army. I joined the regiment the first week I was in. John was away. All these things were happening. I was having the 2 abductions while John was away on practice camp. And then when John came back in, I met him and we had something strange happening in the room. He'll tell you about that. Mm-hmm. And then the day after this thing appeared in front of our beds, I went on to MK Ultra the next day. It was a very mixed up time. Very, very quickly things were happening so quick.
Yeah, it was really intense, but I think, why don't you just go ahead and tell them about this mass abduction? Because this is really extraordinary because, you know, it involves maybe human beings pointing guns at people saying, you know,
go towards the light and
So Bill, why don't you tell that, because that's not a long story, and then maybe we can bring John on to tell us what he experienced.
I've got an echo, haven't I? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. As I say, I joined the army, did the 3 months training, went to my regiment. As I got to my regiment, I've just told you part of it. Everyone was away on practice camp. There was what they call a rear party, means probably about 50 guys left there or something, I don't know. Well, 15 of us were put onto an exercise. Now, I didn't know these guys. I didn't know anyone. But the one person I knew was a guy called John Jerems. Me and John have just been talking about this, actually. John didn't know him either. His name was John Jerems. I know they exist because I spoke to his brother. I know they exist. We were put on this exercise with about 13 other guys. John and I were left at the end of a track while the vehicles pulled into a field about 200, 300 yards up this track. Me and John were left at the end of the track on guard. We've got nothing to guard, but that's procedure in the army. Put a guard out. We'd been there a couple of hours, sitting there, smoking, chatting, getting to know who we were. He told me where he was from, Stoke-on-Trent. And we didn't get relieved, and it started to go dark. Well, in front of us was like an orangey, purpley mist coming towards us. And I, being a new soldier, didn't know what it was, but John said it could be a mock gas attack. So we went back to the vehicles. I woke up an NCO, who I believe I know the NCO, but he's not admitting it. John will know. I'll talk to John about this. He knows who it is. And I said that John said there's a gas attack, orange mist coming up. And he said it's impossible. We stood down, which means the exercise is finished. And of course we said, thanks for telling us. Nobody told us, you see. So we went back to the vehicles. We couldn't find anywhere to sleep. You never ever sleep under a vehicle. Not the heavy vehicles anyway. Well, none at all really. And we found on top of a Saracen, we used to call them an armoured pig. They're a very heavy vehicle, armoured vehicle, 2-inch thick armour or something, very, very heavy. On top, we keep the Hessian and camouflage nets, and it's quite soft. It's soft on the ground anyway. And so me and John got on top of there to lit a cigarette, thought we'll sleep here. As that happened, what happened next? We saw a light and something looked like parachutes coming down into the field to my right, where some of the vehicles were parked. And the light was very, very bright. It was a very, very bright light. And I saw the guys who were fast asleep starting walking towards this light. And of course, being nosy, I started to get down off the vehicle, and my back was towards the wood that was in front of us as we were sitting on the vehicle.
So the other guys walking towards the light were like in a daze, or they were?
Well, it was quite a way away. It was 200 or 300 yards away, but it looked to me as though they were just walking towards this light. There was no sounds, no nothing, just no sound. They weren't moving their heads from side to side or anything. They just seemed to be walking straight towards this light. Mm. I, being a little nosy, wanted to get down and see what was going on. So I started to get down off the vehicle, and I had my back to some woods that were in front of me. John was sitting on the vehicle facing the woods. My back was to the woods. As I was coming down, John said, don't go. No, don't go. And I've just got my first foot on the ground as he said that. And I'm thinking, what do you mean don't go? And as I turn around, I see guys, I think there were 3 or 4, I'm not exactly sure how many, and I think they were blonde, with short hair, I think. They seemed to be all blonde, and it was the light from the, honestly, it was the light that made me feel that. They were in like a dark blue type uniform, with a light blue badge on the right hand sleeve, a long oblong type, squarish oblong type, light blue, shiny light blue badge. I know a little bit about weapons. What he was holding in his hand looked like a 9mm pistol, a Derringer, not Derringer, I forgot the name, like a 9mm, the new type of 9mm.
I think you said it was a Beretta, did you, Bill?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Beretta. It was like a Beretta, that's right. But it was twice the size of a Beretta. It was bigger than a Beretta, maybe more than twice the size. This gun was big, but he did point it towards my head, so maybe that's why I thought it was big. Maybe. It did look big, though, you know. Maybe they do look big. It's the first time I've ever had one pointed towards me within inches, so it did look big.
Yeah,
but
it always looks bigger when it's pointed towards your head, you know.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. That's the only one I've ever had pointed towards my head, so, you know, I don't really know. But as he pointed towards my head, he said, he hadn't pointed towards my head when he said, walk towards the light. And I was thinking about what John had said, and I turned around to look at John, and that's when he pointed the gun straight to my head. He cocked it. I watched him cock it, because they cock at the top. You pull back. And he went click, click, and they do clunk, clunk, you know. And I knew he cocked it, and then that's when he pointed it straight towards my head. So at that period in time, my brain's saying, do as you're told, because otherwise you're going to end up with no head, you know. And so I turned towards the light, because I got back to the light at that time. I turned towards the light, and I just walked towards the light. And that's the last thing I remember till the next morning. And we're on a parade, and there's 3 very high up brass. That means very high up officers, for 15 men. At that time, I didn't know this was unusual. I was a new soldier, first week in my regiment. I hadn't got a clue what was going on. So I'm sorry, somebody just tried to phone me, I think. Sorry, John, can you pick me up where I am?
Oh, turn on your mic. Joanne, your mic is off.
Sorry, Bill. It was just that you're on parade without any memory of the night before.
Yeah. Next morning, I'm on parade, 15 of us, 3 brass in front of us, very high up. And John is standing next to me, telling me, do you remember what happened last night? And I'm saying, no. Nothing happened, did it? Where are we? Who am I? And then, before he could say much more, he did start to talk about abductions, but before he could say much more, these 3 officers started very loudly saying to us, whatever happened last night, or this morning, or any time, you will never ever mention again, and you will never talk to each other about it, and you will sign the Official Secrets Act again, another one. Well, it was a bit of a waste of time, because I couldn't remember what had happened anyway, until I was 44. When I was 44, that came back as well. This is what came back. And then we had to sign a new Official Secrets Act, and that's all I remember of that. Well, a few days later, me and John were taken again. But that's, as I say, that's in the book. These are quite long stories, so I don't know how far we want to go into this.
Yeah, it seems like your memory was wiped out on the spot after each abduction afterwards.
Well, I can actually remember forgetting at Abingdon. I remember forgetting. I was coming down. This is the story. I haven't told you this story yet, but I was coming down, and I thought, I'll just tell you this little bit. I thought, how do I tell my mother about this? And then straight away, tell her what? And then I think, how do I tell my wife about this? And straight away I thought, tell her what? I remember actually forgetting. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the only way I can describe it.
Hey, Bill and Mark, I think one of the most interesting things about this event is that the guy that Bill was with, he didn't really know him that well. Obviously, he's a new soldier. They're both new soldiers. But I mean, he doesn't remember seeing him. He thought he was part of their barracks, but didn't remember seeing him there. It's all a bit mysterious. And then, Bill, why don't you tell the story? Because this is absolutely unbelievable, of when you, 40 years later, found a number and were really wanting to try and get somebody from then to corroborate, you know, for yourself, for your own peace of mind, the story. And you actually ended up speaking to John's brother.
Yeah, sorry, am I there?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was about, I think it was about 8-9 years ago now, I think. I'm not very good with time now. I'm not very good with time before I had the strokes. I went onto a website, an army website, an old army web, very old one. And I found, I didn't find John's brother's number, but I found out where he worked. And he worked at the Blackpool, as some kind of technician, on the Blackpool, what is it, the fair, Blackpool Fair, Blackpool Illumination Fair or something. Mm-hmm. So I got the number of them, and I phoned them and asked them if they knew, I forgot his actual name, Jerems, anyway, his name Jerems. Anyway, I forgot his name, actual name. Asked if they knew him. And they said, yes, he was one of their workers, but he was away on holiday at the time. And I said, could you get a message to him that I told him who I was and why I wanted to talk to him about, you know, to do with the army. And he did actually get back to me. Hello, are we still there?
Yes, Bill.
Yes.
Sorry. I've got some strange noises going on. Sorry, Joanne, can you pick me up?
Yeah, so you're speaking to, let's just call him Joe for want of a better name, and this is John's brother. This is not the John is on with us tonight. This is John who was with you on the abduction, and you're speaking to his brother, saying you're trying to find him because.
Yeah, this was the strangest thing I've ever. Well, actually, it confirmed to me that it was the first real thing that confirmed to me that I'm not crazy. You know, that I wasn't actually having a mental breakdown. I got hold of John's brother, and I said, I really need to talk to John. And he said he won't talk to anyone. And I said, what do you mean he won't talk to anyone? He said he hadn't spoken to anyone for 35 years. He won't open his curtains. He won't answer the telephone. He won't do his own shopping. He lets people drop it through the door. He won't speak to any person. He won't speak to any living human being. And he said he won't even speak to me. And I said, well, what's happened to him then? And he said, he's gone really mad. He's actually gone mad. He thinks he's been abducted by aliens all his life.
Whoa.
And I nearly fell over. I thought, what? And I said to him, I must speak to him. He's not crazy. It's happening to me as well. It happened to both of us while we were in. And he said, well, I don't remember you very well. He said, I don't remember you. I said, I never spoke to you once. John introduced me to you once in the barracks. And said you were brothers and you actually started fighting while I was there. And he said, I remember, he said, you're right about what you're talking about. He said, I don't remember you. He says, but John won't speak to anyone. And we had to end the conversation by then nearly, because he then told me that they weren't in the army. Well, he said to me, when did this happen? And I said, 1968. And he said, well, it couldn't have done. We were in the army in the mid-50s. We weren't in when you were in. And I just lost it then. I just thought, it took me a few weeks to go back into looking, because I couldn't handle that. It was just so crazy.
And what was also a little bit crazy, if I may just say, was that on the day that you were all being told not to say anything to each other about this mass abduction and the one at gunpoint, that you noticed that although BD, that's battle dress, was still used occasionally, or bits and pieces of the uniform were used, it wasn't generally used. It was now the modern camouflage outfits that we see, except on that day, you said to me that you remembered that most of the guys were in BDs, battle dress.
I wouldn't say most.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood then.
Yeah, I wouldn't say most, because even 4 people wearing BD would have been very, very unusual then.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. I didn't know on that day, because I only just joined the regiment.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't know that until I started finding out about the dress of that regiment, because during training, really, you don't know anything until you get to your regiment. Well, I'd only been in the regiment a week when this was happening. So I didn't know the procedures, and I just took it as normal. I don't now, but I did then.
Right, and this shows basically the collusion between the army and ETs. Well,
to me, yes. To me, I on that occasion, yes. On that occasion, it seems so. But I don't know how much collusion. I mean, I don't think it's a big collusion. Put it this way. They waited till the camp was empty, nearly, before they did that to us. The camp was empty, near enough. Only the rear party left. As John will tell you, they were around practice camp when I joined, you know.
Right, so maybe they selected a few, only the few that they wanted to pick for the experiment.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was solely for me. I don't know. I haven't got a clue. It just seems.
What about that station in the base in Germany that was connected to Area 51 personnel in '68? Can you tell us about that? Well,
the connection with that is that we had technical guys, mm-hmm. and that was the ground. I think John will tell you about this. I don't know if John knows about this. He will know about it. Mm-hmm. We had some technical guys, and we had a PX. And I used to go to the PX occasionally on nickel night, because it was nothing for a pint of beer. You know, a bottle of beer was virtually nothing. And I used to go and get a few down my neck before I went out. But I noticed that they never spoke about their job. They never. I don't even remember seeing any technicians, but they were there, apparently, I was told. And that's why we had this cavalry regiment guarding them, and they never spoke.
Can we say, Bill, also that what we haven't mentioned is that you were a nuclear soldier. This was a nuclear base, and there were nuclear rockets that they were working on, those techies or whatever that you never saw. And you know, that was quite a big deal that it was actually a nuclear base, because in '68 there weren't too many around. And that was, you didn't know that this was Area 51, but you were told by comrade, colleague, whatever, and that still didn't, mean anything to you until many years later. So it was a nuclear base.
Yeah,
is the issue there.
But I mean, I do nothing about any of this. I mean, it was, to tell me that was a useless piece of information for me, But the reason that we were connected to was White Sands, really, where the missiles came from that's where they tested them at White Sands, the missiles, and that was the connection, I should imagine, with Area 51, because there must have been a connection there, I would imagine, especially what happened to me and John, or not the John we're going to talk to now, the other John. There had to be a connection, because I mean that just doesn't happen in a normal regiment. Well, I don't think it does anyway. I don't think so.
So it was during the Cold War period.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, our nuclear missiles, believe it or not, were sold to us by the Church of England. Think about that one. They've their money out. They've taken their money out now since it was found out.
Yes, yes, and so do you think after all those years, do you think you were specifically picked for those experiments or abductions, as opposed to maybe most of the soldiers who are not picked for abductions?
I think so. On that occasion, yes. I'm not saying that. It's very difficult because it feels like I've been constantly reducted by in different ways, different entities, whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
All my life, just different ones. It was as though when I said yes to the Nords, I put myself in for this. Maybe I did it to myself, you know. But they've never really harmed me as such. Not physically, maybe mentally. Right.
But I mean, the event that you described in the army, it sure looks like they facilitated, the abduction, the mass abduction, and then pointed a gun at you to make you go towards the light. So, Joanne, what do you think? Can we maybe bring John on to talk about the army years when he knew Bill?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Maybe I can preface this with a little story, because that just gives another layer of interest. And it is that a young soldier contacted us and Bill about a year or so back. He was about to leave the army, actually, but one of the reasons he contacted Bill was because he'd heard an interview, and also he was at the same or near the same location as Senelager. And one of the reasons he called was because he'd had a sighting of a reptilian, very full form, but slightly transparent, so that you could see his locker the other side of the body. But it was such a real, tangible 3D experience for him that, it really freaked him out. And then I did a bit of research on that area and any groups who may have been doing some research work there. And there's a place called Paderborn, and there was a Paderborn Paranormal Research Group. And they actually reported that and you can see this on YouTube, that quite a few army guys had reported seeing reptilians in the area or had experiences involving reptilians. And I think that is really, really telling because of Bill's, longer experiences and also what John's about to share. So John and Bill were sharing a room, I think, at this point. And, the guys had some interest in, things paranormal. But I'm going to let our surprise guest, John Sutton, perhaps, Mark, you want to bring him in and let him tell the story rather than me, because he was actually there.
Sure. Hi, John. John Sutton.
Hello there, Mark. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on. Yeah, very nice of you. I've been watching this, listening to this with very great interest. Yeah, I was with Bill, and his stories sound fantastic, but I was there, and I can tell you that this particular story was absolutely true. I think it was October 1968, and I'd never met Bill before, really. And when I came back from, as he said, practice camp, which is an exercise where the military run through they run through all the weapons that they're using, practice using it, come back to camp, clean them up, and we were back, and it would be about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up having heard footsteps coming across the room, and I thought, oh no, it's that drunken Welshman again. I sat up slightly in bed and looked across, and at the foot of my bed there was this really large sort of illuminated creature that I had never seen anything like this before. I thought, is this a soldier? Is this a ghost? It certainly wasn't Taffy, because he was in his bed asleep. And this monstrosity that was stood at the foot of my bed absolutely terrified me. I was frozen stiff with fear. I could not scream, and I did try to scream. And the next thing, it was 7 o'clock in the morning and we were waking up. And the man in the bed opposite to me was Bill Brooks.
Wow.
and he'd seen exactly the same thing. Following that incident, the barrack rooms were haunted. For some reason, I could hear incredible sounds booming and banging in the middle of the night. And I think there was one or two other people that could hear it, but the majority, there were probably 100 soldiers in that particular barrack, but they couldn't hear it. Very few people could, but it sounded very much like somebody dragging a great boulder down the landings, and you'd open the door thinking, goodness me, there's an earthquake, but nothing there. It was as if, we were in touch with another dimension. I have to admit that at the time I had been messing with a Ouija board. I was a young man, I didn't know any better. And I was in this specific room in the barrack block one night playing with this Ouija board, and it spelled out, the man in the corner who is daring to laugh will regret this, because the soldier in the corner was rolling around laughing at us playing with this Ouija board. I thought nothing about it, put it away and went back to my room. Anyway, the next morning, the guy came running in at about 5:30. You maniac, have you seen what you've done to my room? I said, I haven't done anything to your room. I've been in bed. So I went with him to have a look. And metal lockers, solid metal lockers, were bent and twisted. And his bed was upside down, all buckled up. He said, I've been hiding under my mattress since about 1 o'clock in the morning when this room started to spin. So whatever had been in there, we couldn't actually fathom. I reported it to the sergeant majors, and they said, right, okay. So they moved him out and shut the room up. And shortly after that, the incident stopped. When Bill was talking about being involved with American personnel and Area 51, yes, there were. We were dealing with, the missile was called the Honest John, and it had a nuclear payload. And immediately, some few miles into the middle of the ranges, there was a series of emplacements where they kept the nuclear weapons. And also, Bill mentioned seeing a visitation at a place called Oswestry. Now, Oswestry was also a military base. It seems that the UFOs have an attraction for military bases. The Americans in the base there, a lot of them were technicians from Area 51. Now, every year, the regiment had to undergo testing by the American government and the American military to enable us to use these nuclear weapons. And I was part of the assembly team that took the nuclear bombs and fitted them to the rockets and tested them prior to firing. So to do this, you had to pass certain tests. Mm-hmm. And I was skint at the time, I ain't got any money. So I thought, well, I can't go on the booze with everybody else. So I got the drill book and I memorized the drill book because I can remember taking the test and I scored something like 100%. And they said, this is impossible. Nobody's ever done this. Now, had I been helped by the aliens? I mean, this was very technical stuff, but it's still in my head, I can't get rid of it. Take sling H4163. I can even name the equipment, because in the military, they give everything a number and they give it, a designated, and I can still remember that. So the amazing thing was that the American military and Area 51 were connected, but it was through the nuclear bombs attached to the Honest John rockets.
Do you think there's some back engineering with ET technology involved with those bases?
I'm absolutely sure that there is. I mean, for a period of time, I was a director of an organization called the International Society for Paranormal Research, and the head of that was a man called Larry Montz, who was a parapsychologist, and he told me that he had spent some time working with a scientist who had been based inside Area 51, and that their job there was to do retro engineering, and that they were working with a live alien inside there. He said, and occasionally these aliens go out of Area 51 into Las Vegas, because they like gambling for some reason. Imagine that, aliens that like to gamble, but they'd go with the American military.
I think Misha Johnston, whom I interviewed and who's based in Las Vegas, told me about this story as well, that aliens had been seen gambling at the Vegas casino. So.
It's incredible, really, when you think about it. But I mean, what are they going to do if they live to be about 400 years old and they're stuck in the Area 51, which is in the middle of nowhere? They're going to need some entertainment,
right? And they're going to end up winning, after all the.
Well, I don't know if they actually did win, but when we were talking about MK Ultra, round about the time that Bill Brooks is explaining all this, I was there, and they did come round, and it was quite senior officers actually, who were of the rank of major. Came to see you and said, we would like to offer you an opportunity, and a big opportunity this, to take part in a vaccine examination, a trial for flu vaccine, and you'll be given extra holidays and more money, and we'll take you to England. And no thanks, I'm not being experimented on, but Bill went for it. And
the soldier you saw that seemed to be like a ghost, with only half his head on.
It did, yes. I mean, it's difficult to actually describe what it was. It appeared to be almost illuminated from within. It was huge, but it seemed to have half of its head missing. So, right. I mean, being a soldier, I just identified this with being somebody who'd been injured, and this was a ghost. But was it a ghost? I mean, it did not communicate with me other than to scare me half to death. And I was a fit, strong young man at the time, but I couldn't even scream.
Could it have been a hologram, holographic projection?
If it was a holographic projection, then it managed to make the noise of walking across the barrack room floor, because that's what woke me up, the sound of the footsteps. And I was initially sure that it was that drunken Welshman who was going to piss in the corner again.
Bill, you saw that being also?
Yeah, well, I didn't know until John spoke to me after nearly 50 years. I didn't know that John had really seen it, and I was quite shocked actually, because I thought it was John with a towel over his head or something, because John is a bit like that sometimes, which we all are, we all had a laugh, I thought it was him at first. But when I spoke to him the next day, he said he saw it as well, because I didn't mention it. I think it was John that mentioned it to me, because I thought, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. They'll think I'm mad,
But John acknowledges that he knew he was a psychic all his life, right?
Well, no, I thought there was something different about John when I met him. I've done Ouija boards and things as well in my past, as you'll see when you read the book. If you read the book, we thought it might have been that brought on the UFO stuff. My parents doing Ouija boards, and when, of course, first thing John got out was a Ouija board, so that sort of connected us in a way. And I thought, this guy's different to the other guys. He's different. Well, he is different. He's psychic.
But also, sorry to interrupt, can I just say, we know that it isn't, that Bill's experiences were not anything to do with the Ouija board generally, because he'd had experiences before his parents had started, using it or experimenting with it. They didn't do it for too long either, as I understand, Bill, but certainly maybe that precipitated some other things, or I don't know, but certainly Bill was having experiences before then as well, so it's definitely not just down to that.
Yeah,
maybe it boosted the disconnection, or just opened a portal towards the astral, or
quite likely.
From what I can gather, and this is my own opinion of it, the whole thing's connected. You've got spiritual death experiences, or UFOs, whatever's out there. We're a speck of dust in a massive universe. We're a speck of dust, even less than that. And we don't even know if there's more universes beyond our universe. it's so small what's happening to us here, really, when you look at it. I mean, this is just a small thing that's happening. But I think we need to wake up. I think we need to wake up and start finding a way to communicate. Otherwise, we're not going to be here.
Well, Bill, I think your book, I've read your book at length. Thank you very much for sending me a copy. I read your book at length, and it is a very brave book, and what you tell is going to help a lot of people. It's called 44, isn't it? And I know that what you're saying is the truth about the matters that I experienced. And when I was a child, my father was a police officer, and we were coming back. It was 1957, and we were driving back from a place called Folridge, a little place over the moors. And as we did so, there were strange lights in the sky. My father stopped the car, and he and I got out, and we watched these. And what I now know to be a UFO appeared before us, multiple lights flying around, all around the car, all around my father. And then we got back in the car, and it would be about 2 a.m. this time. And he said, under no circumstances will you ever tell anybody what you've seen, because he did not want to be the policeman that saw UFOs and flying saucers. But here we are, 50 odd, nearly 60 years later. But that was happening to me when I was 7, 8 years old. So the similar kind of life that Bill and I have led, and we're both connected back in Sennelager in Germany in the year 1968.
And times have changed, because you see now that the police officers are gathering testimonies about UFOs, like Gary Heseltine in the UK, and we have Jean-Claude Bourret over here. So all around the world, there are police officers who are interested in police testimonies and UFO sightings.
Yes, I'm hoping. I'm sorry, I was just going to say I'm hoping that some more of military personnel will come forward, because there is a great fear amongst them generally, who have things to lose, to come forward. And I know, I have a case, particularly I can't speak about very much because of that issue, because of safety issues. And, it's a great shame, because, when you hear about these things, you know that if the public at large came to know this as a fact, then, our world would change very quickly.
Yes, especially for the advanced technologies that they're hiding from us, with free energy and anti-gravity-based propulsion systems, and all energies fossil fuel energies and nuclear energies would crumble, and and the lobbies would be very unhappy. And what do you guys think of this secret space program? Because I know I've interviewed quite a few people. Sometimes on this channel here, and sometimes somewhere elsewhere, like Randy Kramer, Alfred Weber. I've interviewed Tony Madenford and Frank Jacob, who filmmakers who directed Packing for Mars. They talked about the secret Mars colony. Do you think all this is tied into this secret space program, or secret programs, black programs, that maybe you experimented? Not willing, against your will, or maybe unconsciously during your time in the military?
Well, I can tell you this. I have a personal friend who was he's an inventor, a scientist, and he was made redundant. I think he was working for British Aerospace or something like that. And he said to me, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I'm only in my mid-50s. I said, I'm going to apply for a job with the MOD. So I said, well, that'd be a good idea, work for the MOD. You got some years to do. Anyway, I saw him he disappeared for a couple of years, and then he came to a party I had at my house. I said, how are you going on, John? He said, well, and his name was John. He said, if I told you what I was doing now, I'd have to shoot you. He said, I said, well, where have you been? He said, I've been in America for the last 2 years. He said, now I can't tell you what I've been doing. He said, but let's just put it this way, it's not too far from Area 51. So quite what he was doing, he wouldn't tell me, but he was an engineer, a scientist, and I'm sure that he'd been working on this reverse engineering. When you look at it, listen, I'm 67 years of age. When I was a boy, technology was a wind-up record player and a 78 disc. And you'd be listening to Al Jolson I mean, today we look at us here. Yeah, I mean, I'm in England, you're in France. Yeah, I mean, we could be anywhere, and you could be doing this on a mobile phone. How have we done this? In 60 years? Is it possible in 60 years? I mean, the advances in technology, it's got to be something from beyond. And I'm absolutely sure that we are being guided. I work as a professional psychic, and I see many people who are in high positions in society who come to me for professional readings, and they don't know what's going on. They are certain that it's alien technology that we're being given. And the way that the money system is being manipulated, why are we doing that? It's just to control humanity. That's what the alien beings are doing. I'm sure it's not us. We don't know what they're doing, because I'm speaking to people who are in government and they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. They make sure that they don't know. And the ones who know probably don't go for a private consultation with you. They have, they have their own psychic super soldiers or regiments, among, in the occult world of Freemasonry, which brings me to the topic of Freemasons with Bill. Since we mentioned the occult, Bill, you were being threatened at one point, and your cousin was murdered by the Freemasons.
Well, excuse me, a little bit of a choky throat. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Yeah, my cousin. When I came out of the army, about a year after I came out, no, 18 months in fact after I came out, I stayed in Germany for about 8 months. And then I came back to Britain, so it would have been about 8 months, 10 months after I come out. I was with my new wife, who was to be my new wife. I'd had a marriage breakup in Germany. I was with her, and my cousin, who I hadn't spoken to for a number of years, Brian, he phoned me and seemed very anxious, so I went round. And I just thought he got trouble with neighbours, or he got a problem, so he wanted some help, which I would have given him if he'd had been in trouble. But when I got round there, I found a different man to the man I knew. Brian was a tough man like John. John's a tough man as well, the one we're talking to now. Brian was a tough man. He wasn't a softie. He wasn't, but he was in a corner caring, which I'd never, ever seen him do before. We grew up together. We fought together. We fought each other quite a lot. We were always fighting each other, falling out. Like brothers. We grew up in the same house. Sorry, I'm losing it.
So we're just talking about Brian, and you're there with him, and he's really afraid, and you can't really understand why he's so afraid.
Yeah, sorry. We grew up together. We grew up in the same house together. So this was a different Brian that I'd ever known. And I thought he was having a mental breakdown. And he started, I didn't really listen to what he said, I must admit. I actually thought he was having a mental breakdown when he started talking about UFOs, our uncle, Nazis, Masons. I didn't even know what a Mason was. I knew a guy called Mason when I was young, but that's about all. I didn't know what a Freemason was or anything like that. And he started talking about all this. And he said to me, I'm going to be dead within a month. And I said, why? He said, my heart. I said, what do you mean by your heart? He said, I'll have an heart attack. And I said, what's wrong with your heart? He said, nothing. But I will have an heart attack. It'll be my heart. Remember that. And he said, make sure you check under my fingernails and under my toes for an injection point. And I took no notice of this whatsoever. No notice. I thought he'd had I knew nothing about what he was talking about. I thought he'd had a mental breakdown. And I just dismissed it. And he said to me, be careful on the way home. You're not followed. Well, I didn't even look. I just thought he'd gone mad. 3 weeks later, I find out he'd died of a heart attack. And in my innocence in those days, I thought, what a coincidence.
But Bill, we've missed out a really important part of the story here, and this is the fact that he was brought up by a guy who was not his biological father, and he didn't know that until he was an adult. So the reason that he even was involved with the Freemasons is because he went to find his biological father, who in fact we know was a G.I. Joe guy who'd gone back to America, and we don't know if he found his father, but we know that he met his uncle, the brother, and that uncle took him into the Freemasons. And he said one of the reasons that they told him that he was going to die was, but he'd said too much. Yeah. And that was, this is a big part of that story. Yeah. Because it gives you the context, it gives you the background as why he would be saying this. And also that one of your uncles, who was an ex-Nazi, who'd been a prisoner of war, had married one of your aunts, and he even mentioned him. Now, he was a perfectly lovely man to you kids, but somehow he'd mentioned him in some way or other.
He did, yeah. Whether it was in a derogative way, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, but he did mention my uncle, who I grew up with. It was the uncle that brought me up. I was brought up by a Nazi soldier. I mean, he was a Nazi soldier because that's what he had to be. He didn't ask to be one. That's what he was. He was forced in, really. He was from Duisburg, and that's an industrial area that they could force people in on, but that he was mentioning Nazis. He did mention my uncle, but I don't know whether he mentioned it in a bad way. I mean, I know now that after the last war, there were 20,000 Nazis left in this country under something called paperclip, I think it was.
Yeah, paperclip.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm not very. I've done a lot of research in the past years into what happened to me, looking for answers. As you can imagine, I'm still trying to find answers now, even now. I don't know anything really. I'm just, all I'm saying is what I've seen and what I've surmised.
Well, NASA was born because of a combination of Nazi scientists like von Braun and Obert and all the other ones, and Walt Disney. So it's perfect propaganda, Nazi propaganda on one hand, and technology, very advanced technology, with deals struck with probably aliens factions and Walt Disney. So
I should imagine Hollywood as well. I should imagine.
Right.
During this conversation, you've been talking about mind control and MK Ultra. The reason I believe that they use soldiers is because they're expendable, aren't they? And the same thing happens to prisoners. Now, in the early 70s, I don't know if you've ever seen a film called Clockwork Orange, in which they're operating on and experimenting on prisoners. Well, I was in the prison system as a jailer, as a member of staff, and subsequently as one of the medical team. And in the scrubs, Wormwood Scrubs, they had a unit there that was experimenting on prisoners, and they put them in front of a television screen and they played to them images of violence and murder and child abuse, and then they injected them with various drugs, and the following week they'd come back and they'd be tested again, all wired up to an ECG, so that they were actually reading what their minds were doing as they were injecting them with these drugs. A number of the people who were doing it went on to become extremely strange and were transported from the prisons into a place called Broadmoor, which was a secure institution for the criminally insane. So were they actually treating these people as being expendable? We don't know, but I know that they were doing it.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yes.
I'm sure they didn't consent to that with full knowledge of what would be done to them, just like Bill didn't. He didn't consent with full knowledge of what was going to happen to him.
They wouldn't. Some of the inmates that I saw were big, strong, strapping men when they went into the program, and when they came out, they'd started to develop breasts, and they'd started to develop, turn almost change of gender. And these people, they were then shipped out. So there was a real, not only a psychological change, but a physiological change.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How dangerous is that? And that's in our society in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, our whole society is under mind control and hypnosis. So propaganda is hypnosis.
Yes, it is.
Let's go back to the, because I know I've heard you, Bill, say that you've only been to the past, not the future.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I've tried to think about this one and tried. And as I said I think I said it in the book. Whenever I've gone forwards, it always seems to be I've had to go backwards first. Or how can I put it another way? I've never gone. Put it this way: I've never gone forward. I don't seem to have gone forwards in time. It's always been backwards, as though the future doesn't exist anymore yet. So I can only go backwards. It's like if you write a book, you can only go as far as you've written. You can't. You have to go backwards to read any more.
Right.
Is that understandable?
Yes, totally. Have you tried hypnotic regressions on some of your events?
I don't want it.
Okay.
I did it. I tried once with, I think you mentioned a lady called Barbara from America. I don't know if it was Barbara Lamb. I'm not sure. I met her for 5 minutes. That was all. 5 minutes, and she said, "No thanks, can't do you," and that was it.
Right.
No thanks, can't do you. That's what she almost said. That can't do you.
Right. Joanne, you think he has time to talk about the Abington incident or abduction?
The Abington incident. How much time do we have, guys? Are we on sort of 10 minutes or something?
We have about 15 minutes or so.
About 15.
Yeah, approximately.
Well,
I can try and do the short version of it.
It's not a lot, but what I would like to say about the Abington incident, in just a precursor, and perhaps I can just give the run-up, Bill, and then you tell the details because it's so amazing, is Bill's, for me, has got two firsts. He's the first person I've ever known who was completely conscious and awake in a crop circle as it was being made. And secondly, he's the only person I've ever known who witnessed an animal being abducted, in this case a cow, and being mutilated, which I find extraordinarily upsetting. But when we know what we do to animals down here, why should we be upset by what the ETs do to us? But I can't help it. I still do find it upsetting. So Bill and this has got some time dimensional slips in it as well. So Bill is doing a job. He's delivering cookers for Cannon Gas. And he's delivering them to the staff of Cannon Gas over a 2-day period. He starts out from the West Midlands. He goes to Southampton. And at the end of that part of the delivery, he's going to come back in the direction of the West Midlands to a place near Oxford called Evesham. And Abingdon isn't very far from Oxford. And so he's delivered the Southampton ones. And by the time he gets to park up, just before he's parking up, he's gone to get himself some supper. He's going to spend the night in his cab, ex-soldier. He's not bothered about that. He's just sitting, making himself comfortable. But he's going to tell you, just before he gets himself comfortable in his cab, what he sees as he finds this place to drive up to and park. Because there are some anomalous things that he sees, but again, this is before Bill has the download. This is nothing that he is aware of. He just thinks it's all to do with farmers. So, Bill, why didn't you take the story off and lead it from when you were going up the track and the lights that you saw?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, right. I thought I got an echo. The first thing I did was park on the main road. And I was about to start settling down when a large wagon went past and pushed my van over. And I thought, I'm not sleeping here. So I went and found a place, found a track, went up a track. I thought I'll find somewhere really quiet to sleep. I didn't notice where I parked. There was an house to my right because it was pitch dark when I got up there. But I was actually looking to my left at as I was coming towards the field, I could see what looked like a sparkling Christmas tree. As I got to where I was going to park, I noticed it wasn't a sparkling Christmas tree. It was more like a Catherine wheel, a firework spinning. That stopped as I parked up. So I started eating my supper. I ate my supper. I got some coffee. But while I was eating my supper, in the field to my left, the first thing I saw was lights going on and off around the field, like spotting the field round. I saw rabbits run away, loads of rabbits running. Quite normal, you see lights. I thought, oh, it must be some kind of helicopter or something. I never even thought anything of it at all. I just let it go. Then I saw the cows. While these lights were going around the field, I saw all the cows were in one bunch at the bottom left-hand corner of the field. As I turned around, ate a little bit more, because I wasn't really taking a lot of notice of this. I know it sounds crazy, but I wasn't. I carried on eating, and while I was eating, I looked again, and the cows were right in the middle of the field. And there was one cow going up into a V-shaped, a triangle-shaped light opening. It must have been an opening inside the ship, which I couldn't see because it was too dark. It was black, completely black, except for this light, and the light blinded me anyway. And I saw a cow going up into this light, triangular light, and I heard it scream, and it was screaming. I would imagine, if I wasn't looking at the animal, I would have thought it would have been a horse screaming, more the sound of a horse. So I really didn't take a lot of notice of it. But as this happened, I saw around the cow, in a very bright light though, I thought it was farmers in blue overalls waving their hands around the cow. Just waving their hands, moving their hands. And that's when the cow went up into the ship, screaming. And then it went completely darkness. No, sorry, got it wrong. It went dark anyway, because this cow had gone into the ship and this door type thing, triangular type thing, had closed. And there was nothing but darkness. So I decided to light a cigarette with a match. And as I struck the match, my radio, which was fitted underneath the passenger, where I was on the passenger side at this time, left-hand side, was fitted on the passenger side underneath the dashboard, which are difficult to get to. So I got my head underneath the dashboard to try and get the station back. It went squelchy. And everything lit up while my head was under the dashboard. So I come up to see what the hell's going on, and to my left-hand side, I see something that looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but with mirrors, all broken mirrors or small, different-sized mirrors, all around it, like glued to it. When I looked at it, I couldn't really see it, but I could see everything else around it. I could see the house, which I didn't know about till the next morning. I could see the house to my right, but I was actually seeing the house to my left. It was really strange to look at. I think it was a cloaking device of some form. As I brought my head back up, I started to put myself back into the driver's seat. My head was now in line with my rear view mirror, and behind me was dark glass. And as I looked at at my rear view mirror, I saw through the dark glass at the back of me alien faces. I can describe now as alien faces. I couldn't then. I didn't know what to describe them as then. As I came up and looked in my rearview mirror, I saw that. Then I came to the driver's seat and realised I hadn't seen those in the back of the van. They were a reflection from the front. And when I got into the driver's seat, these aliens, I can only call them that, their faces were actually nearly on my screen of my vehicle. And I looked behind them. My brain was now spinning, of course, as you can imagine. My brain was in overdrive. I looked behind them and I saw in the woods, straight in front of me, about 300 or 400 yards, were aliens coming out of the woods. I couldn't describe them too well, but the light seemed to come from them. As John said about that thing, the light seemed to come from that. Well, John will understand what I mean, but when the light came out, it seemed to come out of them, there was no lights around, just out of them. Then they started walking towards what was now to the left of me. I can only describe as a spaceship, must be, with an orange type light. I've missed a bit of this story out, by the way, for time. The orange light, and in the lights, the orange lights, there were tubes of light, white lights coming down, 3 or 4, I can't remember how many, coming down towards the ground, onto the ground. Inside, I saw snow going through them, like the whole place was snowing. Then I saw like a jigsaw puzzle inside these tubes of light. And as these jigsaw puzzle fell to the ground, I saw greys at the bottom. I can't describe them too well. I can describe their faces and their hands. That's all. I'll explain that why. When they were on my screen, they looked like bald babies with old men's faces with big heads. They had large eyes, black eyes, not as big as some of the ones I've seen on the pictures and drawings or whatever, but they had large black eyes. They had no ears really. There might have been a little lump, but no ears. They had no nose as such. It was flat with 2 holes where the nose should be. The mouth, it was very, very tiny. It was just a slit, no lips, nothing like that, just a slit. And when they moved their mouth, oddly moved their mouth, their whole face went wrinkled. And I called them old men's faces with babies' heads. That was my brain at the time. Because you can't, when you're looking at something you can't describe, your brain doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. And as I'm doing that, I'm looking at their faces now. Their heads come into the screen like as though it turned into a cling film or something, like watery cling film. And one had his face straight in front of mine within an inch, I'll say, and the other 2 come through, and they were at the sides of my head. I didn't see necks or anything. Maybe I didn't notice, but all I could see was their heads. And next thing I know, I'm going into the ship. I'm going into these lights where the tubes were. The tubes have gone. Now I'm now inside an orange fog light. And I'm going up, and the greys are all around me. And I'm going into the ship. As I go into the ship, I'm stood upright. I'm not walking. I'm seen to be floating forwards, as though I was walking. So I couldn't, my head was solidly in one position, and my eyes were in one position. But you can actually see, you can try it yourself. I learned this technique in Northern Ireland, to see both sides of me and in front of me at the same time. We tried to. And
Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're getting close to the end of the show, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to let Joanne just sum up the rest of it, because we need to get to the final words, and And
yeah, John, quicker than me. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Joanne. Your mic is off. Your mic is off. We can't hear you. Your mic is off.
Joanne?
Sorry, there we go. Sorry, I was just saying that Bill has so much to share. It's an incredible set of stories. But just to sum up, that Bill, when he was in the ship, saw piled on top of one another units that he called jail cells, which appeared to have something of life in them. Doesn't know what it was, couldn't see them properly, but was aware of movement. And then he's taken into an area where he's laid down on a gurney, a hospital bed, and you can see slightly forward, and he's looking through an archway, sees the cow, sees them doing some arm movements, which sees the cow roll out of the ship, and then thinks, oh, I'm next. You know, he's going to die, because he knows the cow's dead. He doesn't know how he knows, but he knows. And one comes over to him, puts his hand toward his chest, if not on it, and says, no, you're human. And with that, some others come, and they, you know, the usual experience, there's the heat up the nose, the heat in the ear, implying that there's something going on there. And then as a drill comes down toward the eye, he blacks out. And that's all that he knows of that. Now, this story does continue, but we really don't have time to go into the rest of it. But he finds himself at the bottom of the sea, and he's asked if he can... you know, he doesn't remember what he's asked, but he remembers his answers is that, no, he can't. He's got a wife and family, etc., etc. So next show, we'll get into all of that. And there's a heck of a lot more, too. So it's a bit of a cliffhanger.
Just like the MIB, the Men in Black story and so forth.
We haven't even touched on that.
So much to it. And how can we get the book, just for the viewers?
It's on Amazon, Amazon.com. If you put in 44, based on an ex-soldier's true story of lifelong encounters with alien abduction, that'll bring up the book. It's also available on Kindle. And please let us know what you think. Write a review. And if you want to get in touch with me, if you're an experiencer or Mark for that matter, but if you're in the UK, it's info@the etnewsroom.com. The etnewsroom.com website is up there, but it's not very functional at the moment, so it will get there eventually. And as I said, you can email, and the number is still the same as was the old A.M.A.C.H number, which is 0795 1752813. It's, of course, a mobile.
Thank you so much, guys. Joanne, Bill, and John. Thank you for coming along at the last minute, and it was a real pleasure to have you. We gave the full spectrum of the broader range of ufology fields, because this, you know, we talked about the flash memory recall, we talked about mind control, we talked about Freemasons, we talked about ET abductions, we talked about the military, secret military technologies tied into secret societies, black programs, and we forgot the Men in Black, but we'll talk about it next time. Thank you so much. You were great, guys, and we'll see you next month and on the Project Camelot network. And it was really great to see you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
and
Mark.
Good luck with
thanks,
next
Brian,
project.
as well. Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you all for being interested in this story. Thank you very much.
Great. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.